Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns.
Hey, this is Kim Howerton, and this is episode number 124. And today we're going to talk about hope. Hope and faith. No, not the TV show from the 90s. Was that the 90s? The aughts? When? I didn't even watch, to be perfectly honest. Anyway, but faith and hope, as in belief. No, we're not doing like a philosophical conversation. Well, I mean, I guess it sort of is philosophical, but it's very much about you and your weight loss journey and your ability to believe in yourself. So let's get into it.
So this is a very common pattern in the world, and I want to call it out because I see it, and it's important to acknowledge it. You might be on your weight loss journey. You start, you see a little bit of weight loss, you get excited, you're like, yay, I'm doing it. And then the weight goes back up because you're like, oh no, what happened? And you're like, oh yeah, I had that Mexican dish that had a lot of sodium and this and that, and I'm probably carrying a little bit more water weight, and you're back and you're forth. And eventually you're like, I feel like I'm just running in place. Like I'm working really hard, but I'm not seeing a lot of progress. And then maybe you have like some wrenches thrown in the works. Maybe you have like an illness come up or some type of health issue that also has some wonky stuff going on with your water weight. And just one day, usually there's like a gradual, like you're like, I'm hopeful, I'm less hopeful, I'm hanging on by a thread, I'm hanging on by my fingernails. And then eventually you're like, that's it, I'm done, I'm out, finished, right? Like I can't take this. I have to have a very emotional day, right? There's a lot going on there. And invariably in these days where you're like, you've reached the limit, what I see those days looking like is that you ran out of belief. You had taken on this weight loss challenge with a small or large or medium amount of hope, like you had an amount of hope in your tank, right? Your tank was so full. And in your mind, you're thinking, well, I'm going to see some progress, and the progress is going to refill that tank, and then that'll just keep me going. But invariably, I keep using that word, but I always see it, that at some point, it could be early, could be middle, could be late, some point, your tank runs empty. And what you do in that space is super critical. So I think it's really important to note when your tank is getting low and make adjustments before it's empty. Because by the time it's empty, you're in a pretty dark place. And so what are some signs that you're starting to feel low in belief, low in hope, low in feeling like you are engaging in an activity that is worthwhile and helpful to your goals? Well, the first one is to be realistic and checking in, right? I have several clients who make assumptions about what will cause a weight loss effect. And then when those assumptions prove false, they then say, well, I'm broken. This isn't working because there's something wrong with me. Instead of saying, hey, my assumptions about what we're going to work are maybe lacking, and I need to pivot. I need to shift my actions to better match the outcomes I want, right? So that's one. The first thing I would say in terms of making sure your tank doesn't run bone dry is once you start noticing, hey, my expectations are not matching my reality, getting real clear and honest and trying to take as much emotion out of it as you can and say, okay, what needs to shift? Are my expectations unrealistic? Are my actions not meeting the level of my expectations, right? What needs to change? Do I need to do different actions, or do I need to change what I think is going to happen? This one I see a lot, where I see a lot of people having some weird expectation that they're going to lose 5 pounds a week. Now, the first week you lose a lot of water weight, get that. That's not body fat, right? So it doesn't work that way. But I don't know where this came from, somewhere I'm blaming it on Women's World magazine. But these tabloid magazines that spout a kind of weight loss that is not sustainable. So I think we have these expectations that that's what weight loss is supposed to look like. Like, it's like that there's a joke. It's like, okay, well, if I have to bake my cake at 400 degrees, that's pretty high for a cake, but you get my point. 400 degrees for an hour, I'm going to bake it at 800 degrees for half an hour, and then it'll be exactly the same. No, it doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. You can't. No. It's going to take longer than you think it will. Bodies and cakes. So that's the first thing. Hey, I'm feeling a little bit demoralized here. Is it my expectations? Is it my actions? Is it both? What needs to shift there? Usually when you make that adjustment, course correction early on in the game, you are able to kind of refill your tank, right? Because you're like, okay, that was the change that I needed. But sometimes you hit a sudden bump in the road where you're like, I was doing well. Like I started, I lost a few pounds. I was like, okay, well, it's going okay. And then you get sick or you have some type of health crisis and suddenly your weight goes up a bunch. And you're like, I know it wasn't what I ate, but this is really demoralizing because I was trying to lose weight and now I weigh more. The first thing I would say there is you got to just get real honest with yourself about saying that the weight of your body, like the effect of gravity upon you, is not the same thing as body fat. And so if some type of health thing came up where suddenly we're very bloated or maybe it was even just a random meal that was very high sodium and you react to that, you have to say I am going to try and divorce my emotions from this experience I'm having right here. Because if I make meaning where none exists or I make the wrong meaning, I am failing at my diet because I'm bloated. No. One actually has almost nothing to do with the other in many circumstances, right? Especially if it's a health crisis. And you have to say all right, I'm going to wait this one out. And I think it's very easy to make meaning or make the wrong meaning out of things going on. And we a lot of us like to feel like failures, it feels like, right? It's our default state. So you can't go there. You just can't. You can't afford to go there is what I want to say. You can't wallow. I mean, you can do all of these things. I would not suggest that you wallow, that you feel sorry for yourself, that you have a lot of self-recriminations. Now, if these feelings come up, totally get it. I don't want to say we all, most of us, myself included, if I got on the scale and it was 5 pounds heavier, there would be some raised eyebrows on my head and a lot of WTFs going on for a few seconds while my brain reorganized itself and said, well, something must be off with my health, my water intake, my sodium, because if I didn't weigh that yesterday and I weigh that today, something went wonky and it has nothing to do with weight gain, right? The thought coming up is kind of inevitable for some of us. For those of you that thought doesn't come up, you clearly were raised right and I appreciate you in the world, but the thought coming up is not the main problem. Indulging that thought, feeding that thought, nurturing that thought, perseverating on that thought, caressing that thought, whatever you want to say, that's the problem. You can't indulge in that. It is self-destructive. It is bad. It's just bad. You have to say okay, that was a thought. We're leaving that thought behind. We're moving forward into more constructive thoughts. So if you find yourself in this place where you've kind of an unexpected experience with the scale, try to think why that might be if you can, and then move on, knowing this should resolve in a few days or when this problem you're having, maybe with your blood pressure medication or some other type of medication or, again, an illness. There's an illness that has gone around the past few years and a lot of people have experienced just random bloating for weeks with that. It's not anything you can fix. It's not a big deal. You're just going to wait it out. I want to share my experience with weight loss here as an example, maybe to give you an example of what goes on for me. And it might not be the same for you, but hopefully it illustrates my point, which is I only see the weight loss in weird pockets. Let me explain what I mean by that. So I can weigh myself every day for a whole month and it's up, down 1 to 2 pounds, up, down 1 to 2 pounds, up, down 1 to 2 pounds. And then 1 week, I'll drop 5 pounds on the scale, right? And so for the month, I've like averaged a pound to a pound and a quarter per week. But on weeks 1, 2, and 3, I didn't see that. It was happening. The fat loss was happening in the background. But because of the way my body water weight tends to fluctuate, it was being obscured by my just up and down in terms of water weight. I'd be like, I seem to be trending down, but I might, if I average out my weeks, I was dropping a little bit, but I was still bouncing around in the same ballpark. And then it's always the week before my period. That week, I'm like, and then the weight came off. And it's not that I don't lose weight. This is where weight gets confusing. Let me say it in a better way. It's not that I don't lose body fat those 3 other weeks. You got to kind of think I have a total body weight, but inside of there, some of it's body fat, some of it's muscle, some of it's water, right? It's all this stuff mixed together. And when we're weighing ourselves, we're weighing all of it. And it's hard to differentiate between what's water, what's body fat, right? On a scale, it can't tell you. Even the ones that tell you, they can barely tell you. Certainly not in an amount you change in a week. That's under their range of accuracy. And most home scales not very good at this. So you're making assumptions about what your body fat is doing when you're just watching the scale number, right? But if I didn't start to learn that pattern about my body and how it reacts to gravity, sort of a monthly cycle, I would probably give up in week 2 every time. And then my life would look like 2 weeks of being strict and on plan and 2 weeks or 4 or 8 or 27 weeks of sort of debauchery, right? And I'd be like, this doesn't work for me. And then I get back on it. I'd see like I'd be like, I'm at this 2 weeks. I haven't seen any success yet. This is terrible. I'm done, right? And just off and on and off and on, just not making any progress. And if I don't stay on course for the whole month, I don't see the fat loss either, right? I don't see the outcome of my actions immediately, right away. It's very random in terms of, it's not random. I could put it on the clock. But my actions pay off later. So if I don't stay true to my plan in week 2, I'm not going to see the results in week 4. But I'm not going to see it in week 2. I'm not even going to see it in week 3. And if I don't keep my faith in myself, if I don't keep my belief in myself from bottoming out in those weeks, again, a momentary thought is not the problem. Sure, I have moments when I'm like, what is wrong with the scale? Or what is wrong with me? And I immediately correct that thought. I say, hey, you know what happens with you. You just got to stick with it. And so not everyone is like me in terms of the way that my weight likes to come off, or body fat, I should say, likes to come off. But I use it to illustrate the fact that you can't attach too much meaning to any one given moment, or you can't let the negative thoughts drive the minivan. Remember, we're in a minivan all the time, which is our brain. And we've got like the 2-year-old, we got the pessimist, we got the addict, we got the, I don't know what else in there. There's all these people. It's just shoved full of people. And somewhere in there is the reasonable adult. And you got to make sure the reasonable adult is driving the minivan. Doesn't mean the other ones aren't in there, but they don't get to make the decisions. They're not in charge. So in those moments when I get on the scale and I see a number that I'm like, what? Instead of freaking out and letting my inner neurotic, she's loud, be like, this means you're broken. Yep, this means all those things we are pretty sure, yep, true. It's like, shut it. Not driving this van. We're not, nope, because the neurotic wants me to go into the kitchen and eat some things. Because what does it matter anyway, right? If this is going to be the outcome. Well, this isn't the outcome. This is just a moment, a step. In the middle of cleaning your closet out, your room looks like a mess. It's like, this is not the end product. We're on a journey. There are going to be moments where it looks wonky. So I really, really want to drive this home for people that you can't attach too much meaning to what's going on right now. You have to trust in the process, which means that you have to trust that the decisions that you have made will lead to the outcomes you want. And again, we double check. We're like, am I truly on the right track? Let's make sure. Let's make sure my reasoning is sound. That's always a discussion you can have with yourself. But that should never be a discussion where the adult is not driving. Because if your inner neurotic addict, whoever, pick the most destructive one in your brain, is driving at that moment, you'll be like flip-flop, jump, 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 jump. Today I'm vegan. No. Now I'm carnivore. No. Now I'm low carb. No. Now I'm juicitarian. Right? You're just jump, 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 jump. It's just no. You got to see things through. But you can also tweak as you go, because let's say for some reason you think your maintenance calories are 2,000 calories. You're like, I maintain my weight at 2,000 calories, which means if I'm trying to lose a pound a week, I'm going to drop them to 1,500 and I'll see a pound of weight loss a week. Now, for me, if that was me, I would see 0, 0, 0 weight loss and then like 4 pounds, right? So we all have our own patterns. But if you're like, hey, I'm 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, and you know you don't have the same crazy pattern that I have, and you're like, it's not budging. I'm not going anywhere. It's now been 6 weeks and I'm not budging. It's not going anywhere. Okay, well, your assumption about what your actual maintenance calories might have been faulty. So let's make an adjustment to that and see. And so you make sort of logical changes or, subtle movements. And even if it had been sooner, right? If it's like, oh, it's 2 weeks and I usually see a change, but now I don't see it, well, then make a subtle change then, right? Knowing how your body reacts. I think all of you are adults and kind of know that you might have these patterns about the way that weight changes happen in your body when you are on a diet. And so you can use that information. And if you don't know that information, now is a great time to learn that information. Learn your patterns. Know what's kind of in the more standard range for you and what's out of it. So you can respond more in the moment rather than in your head. So I just want to put it out there that in those moments when you feel like you're hopeless and you're flailing, the wrong person is probably driving, and you need to not give up on yourself. You need to stay the course, make the right decisions, make changes, pivot if you need to. Usually it's not so much a pivot as a shift, right? A subtle shift. But don't let yourself make the wrong meaning out of a moment that will pass. All right, guys, thanks for joining me on my thoughts this week, and I will talk to you next week.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled that you're part of the Keto fam. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.